So today we're moving on to a new skill, the analysis of language, particularly the analysis of language in non-fiction texts. This is very much a way of looking at how a writer chooses language, chooses particular words or particular short phrases in order to get across what they're trying to say, what they're trying to get us to see. So far, we've been working in our language stuff, mostly, apart from the writing, we've been working on paper 2, which is the non-fiction paper. We've worked on inference, reading with inference, a very, very important skill that we're going to keep coming back to. We looked at following arguments, which we will develop further in the next week or so into a question. And then we took that idea of inference again and we applied it to a comparison of two pieces of writing. Okay, so that's where we are now. This language question that you're going to be given will take one of the two sources that you are given for the non-fiction paper, take a section of it usually, and ask you a question about how the writer uses language to achieve something. Now, I'm going to be using, again, like I did last time, as the model, the Aberfan and London sources, and it's actually only source A, the Aberfan source. So, if you need to, pause the recording now and go and get a copy of the Aberfan recording so you can see what I'm referring to. Okay, I will put the words up on the screen here, but you may well find it useful to have your own copy. Now, the question that's being asked here about that source in that section, in that bit, the writer is talking about the coal tips themselves, and we're just looking at how does he use language to describe them. Okay, that's all we're looking at, the choice of words and phrases. Now, I'm going to take you now through a process by which you do this. The extract, as you see here, on the mountain above Aberfan there were 7 such tips. The evening sun sank early behind them. To some of the younger generation had always been there, as though dumped by the hand of God. They could be seen from the school windows, immediately below them, rising like black pyramids in the western sky, but they were not as solid as they looked. It was known that several had moved in the past, inching ominously down the mountain. What was not known, however, was that the newest tip, number 7, was a killer with a rotten heart. It had begun in Easter 1958 and was built on a mountain spring, most treacherous of all foundations. Gradually over the years, the fatal seeping of water was turning tip 7 into a mountain of moving muck. Then one morning, out of the mist, the unthinkable happened, and the tip came down on the village. The children of Pantglas Junior School had just arrived in their classrooms and were right in the path of it. They were the first to be hit by the wave of stupefying filth, which instantly smothered more than 100 of them. Okay, now, that section, therefore, first of all, you would notice is about the having been told what the tips are, about the tips in Aberfan, about it starts off telling you what they look like. It goes into one particularly and how it why it was so unstable, and then it goes into what actually happened with it. Now, I want to introduce at this point, once as I often do, the misconceptions, the problems, the mistakes that you could well make. Because we are looking at language here, we are not looking at inference like we did before. So we are not inferring things about the coal tips. We are really looking at the writer's craft, at their choice. So when we look at this, we are going to be noticing, we are going to be finding words or phrases which could be used or which are used by the writer to create an effect. We're not going to look at what we've been told. It's the how, not the what. Okay, I'm going to take you through that. So now, in terms of analysing language, Here is a 3-step process for you. This is what you're going to be doing before you do any writing so that you can answer the question. The first step is noticing. The second, looking for meaning and connotations. And the third, looking for the effect in context. So what I mean by that is the first step, you actually have to notice the examples where language has been used creatively. Okay. The second step is when you think about the meaning of the language you've picked out, the meaning of those words, the precise meaning, and the connotations, what they make you think of. Okay, what ideas come into your head with it. And then the third section is when you put them back into the context of the extract that you're looking at. I'll take you through it and you'll understand hopefully better what I mean by that. Let's start with noticing. Now, when you're looking through this extract, for examples of words or phrases, you're looking at, and I think this is the best way of putting it, words or phrases which don't have to be there. They're not performing a function that is necessary in terms of our understanding. Okay, they could easily be replaced by much simpler words or just not be there at all. Okay, that's what we're looking for. Words or phrases which don't have to be there. Okay, what does that look like? Let's go back to that page that we had before with the extract that we read through. Now, I'm now going to show you some of the phrases that I would identify. And this is the first stage here, the noticing of them. You're going to notice far more than you'll ever use in your answer. And you don't at this point have to analyse all of them. You just are looking for ones that stand out to you as something that doesn't need to be there. Okay, so we can see the first one. The evening sun sank early. Now, I'm looking at that because we didn't need to be told that. Okay, that the evening sun sank early behind them. If we were being told that they're so tall and the meaning behind it is that therefore you couldn't see the sun, we don't need to be told it by the phrase sank early. Okay. Now the second one here, to some of the younger generation, had always been there, these tips. To then add in, although dumped by the hand of God, it doesn't have to be there. But you can see how that has been additionally added in because the writer is giving us a broader picture of how they felt about it. Now again, they could be seen from the school windows immediately below them. Now the sentence could stop there and still tell us exactly the same information. But by giving us then that they were rising like black pyramids, we are given more detail through language. It just gives us a broader picture. Okay, the same is true for describing that the movement of the tips was them inching ominously. Okay, then we've already been told they moved. That's giving us more detail about how they moved. Calling the tip number 7 a killer with a rotten heart is obviously a very expressive phrase. It could just easily have said what was not known, however, was the newest tip, was dangerous. Or it could have just begun with, it had begun in Easter 1958. When it describes the water as fatal seeping, again, those are two very descriptive words, and the fatal bit certainly doesn't need to be there at all. And then it turns into a mountain of moving muck. Again, a phrase that could just be much more factual, but you can see how that phrase is being used to give us more. The same with calling it a wave of stupefying filth and describing it as having instantly smothered more than 100 of them. Hopefully taking you through that gets you to see why those are language phrases. Some of them are obvious because they're images, rising like black pyramids, a killer with a rotten heart, a mountain of moving muck, a wave of stupefying filth. They're clearly images, similes, metaphors, personification. Some are just choice of descriptive words, fatal, seeping, inching ominously, instantly smothered. But they are not things that give us vital information. Okay, for example, you might look at this and initially have thought about picking they were not as solid as they looked, thinking, okay, because I can talk about the word solid. Well, no, it's just telling you they're not solid. There's not really much detail to that. Okay, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Now, to be honest, don't panic, because if you pick something out that really isn't a good example of language here, you'll actually find it very difficult when you try and comment on it, and therefore you'll just ignore it and you'll just move on to something else. And we're looking here at, I picked out 9 examples. It's a 10-minute question. I'm not going to cover 9 examples, 2, 3 at most. But doing this allows me to choose the best that answer the question better. But we'll deal with that when we're looking at writing an answer to the question later. So the key here is notice the phrases that jump out, that don't need to be there, that tell you much more about what the writer is saying. So the next step is to take those words or phrases and look at their meaning. And I'm talking about their precise meaning, out of context. So we're not looking at them within what is being said in the extract there. We're looking at just the meaning of those words, the exact meaning. Now, what we want to avoid doing here is give a synonym. Now, if you don't remember what a synonym is another word that has a similar meaning to it. So if we saw, for example, the word shattered, we wouldn't say, its meaning is that something's broken. No, that's a word broken. What precisely does the word shattered mean compared to broken? Why would you choose that precise word? That's what we're looking for. And then the connotations bit, again, something many of you will have looked at before, is about associations in your mind. That's where it's not the meaning of something, it's what it makes you think of. So, for example, the word shattered might make you think of glass, okay, because that's what you generally think of as being shattered. It might make you think of somebody feeling shattered. It makes you think about the idea that somebody's been running extremely fast, and we use it in that way. So meaning and connotations. Right, what does that look like? Let's take some of those phrases we just... Let's start with the evening sun. The evening sun sank early. Now I focused in on the word sank. So what's the meaning of the verb to sink? Well, it is precisely, it's a very sudden movement down. If you think about it, I always think of using my hand, sinking down. It seems to be a very sudden movement to me along those lines. Now you might disagree with that. You might think, well actually no, I think sank is a kind of a slow movement, but when you can't stop. That probably works the same way. When I say sudden, I don't mean it moves quickly. I mean it isn't expected that it sinks. Okay, it's not natural. But it also, if I go to the connotations, it makes me think of ships, particularly we talk about ships sinking along, and the idea of ships being forced down by something else. But it also makes me think of a movement of people when they sink. That idea of someone giving up hope, and just sank down. Okay, so that comes to my mind. Right? Now, next one, dumped by the hand of God. Now again, what about the hand of God? Well, it's a phrase that is normally used to describe a judgment as far as I can see, okay? The idea of the hand of God appears, pointing and saying it's you, or in the biblical story, writing on the wall or something like this. Usually the hand of God is something very, very much that comes down and judges you. So it makes it seem as though God is taking action in retribution for something. Okay, retribution, you've done something, people have done something wrong, and so God is reacting to it. But it also makes me think of the creation story, the hand of God creating everything. So I've got judgment, I've got creation. Now I don't know if I'm going to use these at the moment, but this is just me taking them to think about the impact of those words. If I leave out this stage, I don't really consider them as word choices. Another example, rising like black pyramids. Okay, so I take pyramids first of all. Now, first of all, what are pyramids? Well, you can picture the shape itself. Well, they're pretty much the sturdiest shape that there is. Okay, the most difficult shape and 3D shape to knock over, aren't they? They're solid, they're unmovable. But then there's also the connotations. Pyramids. They're famous monuments in Egypt. We all know that. Okay? And what are those pyramids? They are elaborate tombs for dead pharaohs and their treasures. So by thinking about what do I think of when I think of the pyramids and what are those pyramids, that might be of help to me. I think probably you're already a step ahead and thinking, aha, tombs, and going ahead with it. But I'm not at the moment. And then I add in black, calling them black pyramids. Well, black is usually a signifier of darkness, or maybe even of evil. So we've got the sturdiness, we've got the elaborate tombs, we've got black as a signifier of darkness, or maybe even evil. Below that, the tips are described as inching ominously. Now, I've focused here on inching particularly here. Now, again, what is the meaning of inching? Well, it is literally to move forward inch by inch. So it's a very slow and gradual movement. But if I think about its connotation, what does it make me think of when something's inching? It makes me think of something that's quite creepy, as if, like in a horror film, because it's got no need to hurry. But the sense of something inching towards you is that you can't stop it. It's just going to keep coming, but slowly. Okay? And then adding ominously to that only adds to that feeling. If you don't know what ominously means, it's like it's connected to the word omen. Okay, so it's like an omen, a signifier of something bad coming. Okay. And finally, I'm only going to deal with these 5 at the moment. A killer with a rotten heart. Right, so I'll take 2 phrases in here. First of all, the word killer. What is a killer? Well, a killer, I think we would define as someone who kills deliberately. Right, okay? Not just someone who kills, but kills deliberately. Right? And often for no good reason. And what about a rotten heart? Well, now, this is more of a connotation here, because we think of the heart as normally representing emotions, and particularly representing love. So if your heart is rotten, okay, then it would suggest that your very core, your heart, is rotten. It would suggest that the place that normally holds love and that kind of passion, emotion, has rotted away. And it's worth noting that I would also think to myself about rotting. Rotting is a process where it wasn't like that to begin with, but then it kind of over time gradually deteriorates. Now, by thinking about these, and I wouldn't necessarily have to do as many as 5 of these at this point in time, but these are just examples. By thinking about these at this stage, what I've got is I've got a real analysis of those specific words and phrases. The choice of saying something is inching ominously rather than moving ominously. Okay? The choice of saying they're rising like black pyramids rather than black towers or something. Okay? Now, I'm never going to comment on the thing it's not, like why it's not a tower, but it is why it is those things that are chosen. So far, what have we had? We've had noticing, finding the right words or phrases. We've then taken those words or phrases out of their context, looked at them on their own and thought, well, what does the choice of that word suggest in general? The next step is to put it back into context, because we need to know what that phrase means in the extract that we're looking. Why choose that phrase in that extract? It's all very well to look at those black pyramids and look at what that suggests, but okay, what is being described as like a black pyramid and why? And that helps us to understand it. So we're looking for the impact that those phrases have when they are used in the way they are in the extract. Okay, again, I've got 5 examples here for you to follow through. Those 5 examples we just looked at in meaning and connotations. So I'm going to take the context itself. So, on the mountain above Aberfan there were 7 such tips. The evening sun sank early behind them. Now, that is important because it's telling me that the reason the evening sun sank early is because the tips were so big. So that factually what happened is that the sun went down early because these huge tips were there. So it got dark early. Now, to that meaning, I apply what I came up with about the word sank. Okay? Why then use that term? And this is what I've come up with. So it seems as though the sun has sank because it has given up hope, as though it knows what's coming. So I've taken that idea. I didn't take the suddenness of the sudden movement. I didn't take the ships. And that didn't seem to work. What most of all it seemed to me was this idea of the sun giving up hope. Okay? So even though factually it's going behind the tips, and so they can't see it, this choice of word gives us that suggestion that it's almost like the sun itself has given up hope because it knows what's coming. Now, with each of these, I'm going to take you with a kind of a challenge as well, because what I would often then do is look at another level of it, how I could take that idea a bit further. And I'm going for the fact that the word early is used. Okay? So having used the word sank, the fact it sank early, well, that's as though, to me, the sun is suggesting that this is a place of darkness. It chooses to go down early because darkness should come early in this place. Again, know what is coming. It's, dark things are coming. Or possibly, another alternative way is to look at the idea that the darkness is actually forcing it down, going back to that idea of sank being kind of pushed down by something else. The darkness is forcing it down because the darkness is dominant. And all of this is to do with this idea of foreshadowing, the idea that this is a place where before it happened, darkness was coming. Something bad was on its way. Okay? Now the next one, dumped by the hand of God. Now look at the whole phrase. To some of the younger generation, they had always been there, as though dumped by the hand of God. So we're talking about people who haven't lived in Aberfan as long. We're talking about the idea that to those people, they couldn't remember anything else apart from those tips. And then applied to that is the idea that it seemed to them as though those tips had been dumped by the hand of God. Now remember, I took the phrase the hand of God here. Of course, you could take the word dumped and take the idea there. And that would work fine. But I took the idea of the hand of God, the judgment, the retribution, the creation story. So what have I come up with? First of all, the writers suggesting the younger generation view these tips almost as something which has always been there, almost a part of the creation. So there you go, I'm taking the creation story idea, applying it to it and saying, well, look, it's like, creating the earth and the heavens, creating man and the beasts, and creating tips of waste. You see the idea that's there. But to take it a little bit further, I've taken the idea of judgment, that maybe the suggestion is that it's even a judgment for God for something. Okay? God is judging the people of Aberfan by dumping those there. And so again, it foreshadows the horror to come, as though it is something that is pushed upon them. Okay? Now, to these black pyramids. Again, this is the tips. They could be seen from the school windows immediately below them, rising like black pyramids in the western sky, but they were not as solid as they looked. So we are talking about the tips. We're talking about what they look like from the windows of the school, which is important, of course, because that's where the disaster is going to happen. And then introduce the fact that despite what's said about the pyramids, they're then described as not being as solid as they looked. Now there, once again, is what I said about pyramids and about the word black. So where do I take my idea of how this is being used in this situation? Well, so let's take the sturdiness first of all. The sturdiness suggesting they're like pyramids makes them seem more powerful. Okay? And even a little mystical. And I could possibly add in the word rising like that as well. We've had the sun sinking. These are rising. And the blackness of them makes them seem like a symbol of evil. Although it's even worse, they were not actually that sturdy. So what we've got is black, evil, powerful objects. Okay? So that's a really good response to begin with. Now, If I want to take it further, I go to my other pyramid section, and I'm sure many of you have thought of this as well. Because, of course, it reminds us that these, like the pyramids, will be a tomb for so many of these children who are looking from the school windows at them. And maybe even, therefore, like a pyramid, they kind of will serve eventually as a memorial to those children. Okay, and it's kind of an irony to the fact of using pyramids that way, especially considering they were used to remember and celebrate pharaohs as though they were gods. Then we've got inching ominously. Again, the context. They were not as solid as they looked. It was known that several had moved in the past, inching ominously down the mountain. So we're given that phrase to describe them movement over the past known years, but also the fact that people knew that these had moved. So when I add in the idea of inching particularly, I come up with obviously the fact that they are personified because they are moving as though they are creatures themselves. Humans themselves inching as calm, creepy villains making their way towards the town in no hurry but unable to be stopped. But this thing about it's known that they've moved in the past allows me to go for the idea that this has been coming for a long time, and then that word ominous does kind of make us wonder why nothing was done about it. Now that is still language because I'm focusing on the use of the word ominous there, suggesting that omens were there, that it was clear something bad was coming and nobody had done anything about it. So again, another example. Okay, finally, let's have a look at the killer with the rotten heart. Okay, the one that many would go for. But what does it say? What was not known, so this is following on from what was known, what was not known, however, was that the newest tip, number 7, was a killer with a rotten heart. So it talks about one specific tip. It's talking about, it's giving it's personifying it as something unknown, an unknown killer. There again is my points about killer and rotten heart. How do I apply one to the other? Okay, so the personification continues, making the tips even more villainous. Now tip number 7 is seen as a kind of stalking killer who is wanting to kill others for no good reason. Okay, so you see how I'm applying that idea of a killer and what a killer is to the picture we're being given as a tip. And then to stretch it further, I've taken the rotten heart, which makes it seem like it has no kind feelings, or that possibly even it was once good, but time has rotted its heart away, making it become a vengeful danger to the town. So you can see through all 5 of those, what I'm doing is I'm taking what I saw in those words and I'm applying it to how that phrase is used in that situation. Okay, what more that tells us. So now it's your turn. This should have taken you a good half a lesson to work through. It's going to be about a half an hour video in general. So that's going to give you about half an hour for you to have a go yourself. So you're going to take the prison sources, like you worked on last week, source B of the prison sources. And all I'm going to ask you to do is to prepare for a question like this. So we're going to take the extract prison sources from the imprisonment of children to his cry was for his parents. You should be able to find that in source B yourself. And the question is going to be, how does the writer use language to describe the treatments of the children? Okay, so you're going to take that extract, you're going to follow the same process. You're going to read through it, remind yourself what's happening in it, and then you're going to apply the 3-stage process. Noticing, meaning and connotations, and the effect in context. You're first of all going to go through the extract, probably with a highlighter or underlining with a pen, noticing the key phrases, any phrases. You don't have to think why, but noticing the phrases that show, that use words or phrases particularly creatively or interestingly to show something where they don't have to have been there. Then you're going to take some of the key ones in there. I did about 5 there. That will do for today, I think, for you. Take the meaning, the precise meaning of the words that you've chosen. What exactly does that word mean? What's the nuance, the subtle meaning of that word? and any connotations they have, just like I did. Then I want you to come back with all of those and think about, put them back into their context and think, okay, so what effect do they have? I'm not asking for a written answer here. I just want you to follow the steps for this section at the moment and send me, not E as it says there, send me what you have come up with. Now, it should look a little bit like those 5 pages we've just been through.